Hello, and welcome to Saving People Queering Things, a supernatural podcast. We were previously known as Driver Picks the Podcast, and the episode you're about to listen to was recorded under that name. Though our name has changed as of season 3, our show hasn't changed that much. Our structure and theme-based discussions are the same, and we're so glad you're here. Now, let's get on the road. Hello, and welcome to Driver Picks the Podcast, the show where we talk about ghosts, road trips, and free will through every episode of the TV series Supernatural. Today, we will be discussing Season 1, Episode 19, Provenance, through the theme of masculinity. I'm Abigail, your host, and joining me today is Jacob.
Hello, I'm not Hannah. The notes say Hannah. I'm not Hannah.
I'm working off of old notes because I didn't have a time to prep the new ones today.
Yeah,
so
calling you out.
Yes, on my lack of preparation. It is now time for our series recap, The Road So Far.
All right.
So the last time the three Winchesters, John, Sam, and Dean, were all together, they ended up parting ways because John was continuing to hunt for the demon that killed Mary and Jess. And they had determined that Meg, who had set a trap for the boys in episode 16, and John determined that as long as the three of them were together, there would be more danger to them, so they parted ways. And the boys are again on their own. And the last two episodes, episode 17 and episode 18, have both been kind of filler episodes in terms of the overarching plot. In episode 17, we had kind of a goofy one-off episode, which was super fun. And then episode 18, we got to see some of the Winchesters growing up. We got to see some of their boyhood experiences and learn a little bit more of their family dynamics. And that brings us to this episode 19.
Even this episode was pretty filler. It was kind of a plain Jane episode.
Yeah, as you're going to see in our 30-second recap, which is what's next.
Fuck. I mean, you just recap the episode and leave nothing for me to do.
I mean, if
Sam.
you chose to recap first, we wouldn't have this problem.
Sure. Well,
so you can
no.
You can't not refuse to go first. You cannot refuse to go first and then be upset that there's nothing left.
I don't want to just recap the story. That's not interesting.
No, you do have fun recaps. They're very unhelpful in terms of recaps, but they are fun.
Perfect. Hey, my last one was good.
Your last one was very helpful.
Yeah, I thought so.
Can you count me in?
Yes. 3, 2, 1, go.
So Sam and Dean go to this town where there seems to be something up with this painting. Everyone who buys it seems to mysteriously die, and they don't quite know why. And so we find out that it's actually someone who was in the painting who killed everyone else. And along the way, as they're discovering this, Sam makes a connection with a girl named Sarah, and Dean is very invested in their 1 episode long relationship. 3, 2, 1, go.
Simmer. All right. Oh, well, Dean was horny again, and then Sam became horny again, or became horny in this episode. And there was some legitimate relationship-y stuff that happened that delved into Sam's relationship stuff. There we go.
Nice. I would like to point out you spent the first 20 seconds, the first 10 seconds of your 30-second recap, cracking your drink and letting it simmer.
Yep. Thank you, pineapple bubbly, which was all that was in Abigail's. I don't drink bubbly. I'm not a basic white person.
Yeah, apparently we don't either, which is why it's the only thing that's been sitting in the back of our show. It's not good.
Oh,
this is why
so bad.
You do not have to drink it. It's not good.
I don't normally like bubbly, but I can manage.
The pineapple one is
pineapple
not nice.
Is so
I
gross.
wanted it to be good, and it was so bad that we have not drank it, and we slowly get rid of the cans because we open it being like, maybe someone will like it, and then usually most of the can gets dumped out.
Yeah.
You don't have to drink it.
You'll probably have to. I'm gonna power through, but you'll probably have to dump out most of this.
That's fine. I'll buy beer next episode.
Oh yeah, thanks.
So it's now time for us to discuss this episode through our chosen theme. And this week, our theme is masculinity, which Jacob very excitedly signed up for.
Because I'm the only dude on this podcast.
It's true. It's true. We have a lot of girls and a number of trans people on this show. And Jacob is our lone...
Good old straight white male. Heterosexual dude.
So very fitting that you're here today to talk about this episode through masculinity. And this episode gives us a lot of things to talk about. Do you have any place you would like to start?
No, I mostly have notes about them being horny and that Sarah's a bad actor. Anyways.
Yeah, she's not great.
We'll get to those later. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of the episode I found was really centered around Sam and his situation, relationship, but with Sarah and how it connects to his past and like his idea of not wanting to lose someone.
Mm-hmm.
Like more like not just break up, but like not wanting to lose someone again because he's lost, you know, two of the four most important people in his, or two of the five most important people in his life. Four. Yeah,
two of the four most.
He's not included. Well, I mean, he's an important person to himself. But yeah, like of the four other people, like he lost two.
And the two women.
Yes,
which women. Is, I think there's a significance to that.
Yes.
Which the gender piece there of like Sam has had that we really know of like two really significant women in his life, and both of them have died, and both of them have died in rooms that he was in situations that seem very connected to him. And I mean, we'll get to this probably a bit more later, but the whole conversation at the end is all centered around the fact that he's really afraid of that happening again, and that is why he keeps himself at a distance from Sarah during part of this episode, and the kind of internal conflict that he's clearly having, despite the fact that he also is very clearly interested in her and is not really shy about admitting that. It's not really actually about whether or not he's interested. It's about whether or not he feels like it's too risky.
All right, I got some points to say against your points.
Okay, I want to hear based on my notes that are mostly are just places for me to jump off on.
Yeah. So you have, first of all, the masculine dirty Impala next to all the fancy cars.
It's almost juxtaposing. What I was thinking about is how it's sort of juxtaposing these different ideas about masculinity, because like you have on the one hand these fancy rich people with these like fancy pristine new cars, and then on the other hand you have like Sam and Dean in the Impala, which is like this big honking heavy dirty thing.
Yeah,
and I wasn't sure where quite to go with that, but I just thought it was very clearly a contrast in the episode.
Yeah, I would say it's not as much about masculinity as it is about difference in upbringing and wealth.
So it's like class is more of a class thing, but class is connected to, I think, masculinity. Like it can. I don't think they're all like inherently connected, but I think there is, even in this episode, some connections.
Yeah, well, and that comes up with the. That almost comes up with like the interaction with
the art dealer,
Sarah's papa, which I'm kind of sad that we didn't get the classic like Sam meeting Sarah's father and having that awkward interaction, right? Of like, oh, this guy's dating my daughter,
right?
That kind of, because that would have been a perfect like introduction of masculinity.
I appreciated that it's not there for Sarah's sake, because she's like her own woman and doesn't need that. But I think you're right.
But I feel like this is the type of show that
if they would
have had that sort of thing, it would have happened because of the stereotype of it. But because it didn't call for it in the episode, it didn't have it there. If that makes sense.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's really interesting, the interplay there too with the art dealer, whatever his name is, because he's very like fancy. He's very like, even the way he moves, the way he talks is very like, I'm the businessman. I'm the like person in charge here. He's not like the person who's hands-on with the art even. He's the person, he's like the big man making the decisions. Even against like Sarah's advice and like suggestions, as is evidenced like when he sells the painting, despite the fact that they talk about not selling it, he kind of goes over her head and sells it, which is like partly, you know, him as the parent and partly him as the like, I'm the one in charge, and which there's like connections there too. There's never a moment where they specifically tie an action of a character to like, this is because they're a man, but there's a lot of like implied stuff, I think. I would like to note, unrelated to masculinity, but the Impala is never this dirty. It is a very interesting choice that they made to cover the Impala with like what looks like a thin layer of like dust and dirt and grime.
They make it look really disheveled.
Yeah, and it's interesting because up until this point, we haven't seen the Impala be dirty unless they're in a situation where like they're driving through the mud, literally. So there's like when it's getting splashed, but like it just like shows up in town dirty, and there's never an explanation, and it also doesn't really. This is a continuity thing that I'm just pointing out because it's not continuous with the way that we know and the way that we will know, like the way that we know already, I think at this point, how Dean treats his car, which you maybe haven't seen, Jacob, in the episodes you've seen, but we've seen him like, this is his baby, literally.
Because
and that's it's weirdly like they used it because for a story reason, but it doesn't actually match. It's not consistent with the rest of the show.
Because what I noticed with that is like, I obviously I didn't notice that, but it to me, all the episodes I've seen it in, it seemed like a pretty disheveled car. I don't remember it being the center of attention, and like
no, and it's gonna kind of grow in that. So that's maybe fair.
I imagine so.
Is I'm also speaking from knowing what we end up knowing about the car later.
The fancy motel was just a funny little tidbit, but yeah, I think there's multiple facets to that. I think they don't feel like they fit in because it's like, oh, this is a weird motel. It's all like
it's all fancy and kind of weirdly feminized in some ways. Like it's kind of frilly, but like frilly, in the way that they like think it's frilly, not because it's actually very frilly or actually very girly. It's just like fancy.
To me, it doesn't seem like quote unquote girly or feminine in any way. It just seems like just not their style.
No, and not where we've ever seen them before in any of the motels we've seen them in. It's weird. It's a weird choice, which I think they're just using to again contrast the fact that like they don't fit, like they stand out in every scene they're in this episode. Almost every scene, because they are like rough and tumble guys in jean jackets. As opposed to like people in suits.
To which I find hilarious considering they weren't in suits when they went to the art auction, but Sam was in a suit when he went on the date. And they didn't think that one through.
No, and we know they have suits. They don't like wearing them, but we know they have them. And Sam at least seems fairly comfortable in it. They've worn a suit.
Oh, I gotta stop drinking.
Just stop drinking the bubbly.
It's
not good. It's not good.
Anyways, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, they've worn suits only a handful of times at this point, and usually they complain about them. Particularly, usually Dean complains about them. But it seems like one of those things where they should have worn it to the art auction. It wouldn't have taken, like they should have worn it to. Well, it wasn't an art auction; it was an estate sale. But it seems like at least Sam knows enough about art and about estate sales that they could have tried to blend better, is what I'm saying. They don't try very hard.
Yeah, they forced them not trying hard just so they would have some sort of not conflict, but like some sort of like contrast and like reason for them to progress in the way that they did, and having to steal the painting and then burn it. Instead of just like buying it or whatever.
Not that they would have had the money to buy it.
Well, at an auction though, it's all that kind of stuff usually happens after. They don't
it's true
straight up give them a suitcase full of money.
No. Well, and they tend to, they have stolen credit cards and stuff. They could have maybe made that work. And other times they will buy things or like fake buy things. So it's interesting they don't.
Maybe we should have written this episode.
Maybe. There are some plot things in this episode that don't fully make sense.
That doesn't work.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, classic guys don't know wine.
Yeah.
And so the girl has to order a beer to make the guy feel less uncomfortable.
It's so weird. And that was like another thing where I was like, if I'm looking at masculinity as it like if I'm looking at masculinity in the like broad sense of like American, you know, blue collar masculinity sort of tropes, especially thinking 2005, like film and TV has changed a lot and we don't see the same tropes that way, but we definitely saw them more back then. And I think that the whole beer wine thing is not something that you necessarily would get now.
No.
And because she's sort of like trying to be like, it's okay that and that one, I don't know, at least to me, and maybe it's because I was looking through this theme, that one read more of as a gender thing than a wealth thing of like
actually the more that I'm thinking about it, it kind of just makes it seem like it's not even a gender thing. Like it is, but it's also, I think, just Dean trying to impress
Sam.
Sam. They're interchangeable in my mind.
Oh, don't say that. You have not seen enough of this show. They are very
I know. Sorry, not the people, just the names are
just the names. Okay, that's fair. I'll give you a pass on that one.
Yeah.
You've only seen like 4 episodes.
Yeah.
So that's fair.
But Sam is just trying to impress Sarah by like thinking that he knows what
pretending that he knows what
he knows. But like he's worldly, but not in that way.
He's also very young, to be fair. He's also only like 22. So, and age of the drinking age in the States is 21. And like, yes, he was a college kid. He obviously drank. And he drank as like young, probably younger too. Like, so that, but he's still like, in terms of like, if you're a teenager, like sneaking a drink, it's probably not wine.
It's not wine. I mean, even at 22, I think
it's probably not wine.
All I knew about wine when I was 22 was it was a red or a white. And to me, at that point, they tasted the same.
Yeah.
But now it's obviously
different. And the drinking age here is younger.
Yes, that's
so
true.
You have 2 extra years to like, Sam makes sense that he doesn't really know a lot about wine.
So I think like there is a gender part of that, but I don't think it's the main thing. I think the main thing was like, this is a funny like date trope that they put in here.
Yeah. I think that's true of like a lot of the things that like there are gendered elements of it, but a lot of it, which is actually really the interesting part of it, is that it's always gender and gender in general, like it's always interplaying with like class and wealth and all these other things that are happening. It's never, our perception of like what's masculine or feminine is always connected to like also our class and what we have access to. And that shows up in this episode where it's hard to pick out sometimes if it's a class thing or if it's a gender thing. There's also, but on the gender related thing, on the masculine related thing, there are a lot of like them doing stuff like particularly I laughed, like had to stop myself from laughing out loud at the scene when they're jumping over the fence and like the big loud music comes on and they're like ricocheting over the fence and it's just like unrealistically fast.
Yeah, it's they're doing
it's like an action sequence, like a manly action sequence.
Movie. It's
hilarious.
It's the
so
like Mission Impossible kind of idea, like the spy movie action scene. Yeah,
it felt a little out of place, but I also loved that it was there because it was really funny.
Yeah, it was great.
It's not a like style they have done very often. Like when they usually like they sneak into places.
But I mean, like,
and I liked that they were just like wicked, like just jumping out, like.
Well, and it makes sense because it's like a heist and they're stealing an art. And I think their 5-head brains were like, we can make this a trope because they're stealing an art piece and just like go ham with the meta and like make it an actual.
It's true. Even down to like they have the gloves in that scene and then the gloves disappear.
Yep.
Like
and then
very quickly.
Disarm the alarm and then
we didn't know they could. We didn't know they were able to do that kind of disarming.
Yep.
We've seen them pick locks a bunch of times, but
even though I'm pretty sure the keypad is a mechanical keypad that is connected to a digital alarm system.
Yeah,
which is really...
they shouldn't have been. I don't think they should have actually been able to disarm it that easily, even if they had the know-how to.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that mechanically works.
We're tearing this bit apart.
Yeah.
I think it was there for a reason, and it's great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Also, on just like a goofy note, like when they burn the painting, they turn the painting, they burn the painting, they go back, and they're having and Dean has like clearly brought them there mostly because they think the job is done. Mostly, Dean has made up this story of losing his wallet so that he can force Sam and Sarah into an interaction. So then Dean like dicks off once he's like accomplished that goal and been like, yeah, I actually have my wallet. I had it the whole time. Like
he fucking hoodwinked me on that one. He got me. I was like,
you were like, yeah, he lost his wallet.
Well, he lost his wallet.
You're
that
like,
gives
oh,
him
that's
a
how
reason to go back and see the painting. He lost his wallet.
And it's just coincidence but what got me there is that Sam's then having this conversation with Sarah. It's really awkward. He's trying to get out of like, as if I put myself in Sarah's situation, I'm just like, oh, this would be the worst.
Yep.
The worst. You feel like you're being blown off by this guy, but also he's trying to be nice, but he's still kind of blowing you off, and it's just weird, and you just kind of want the interaction to be over.
Confusing interaction.
Yeah.
Yes.
And then someone walks by with the painting, and Sam literally yells,
Whoa.
like
I can't
yeah,
remember what he
it
said.
was so goofy because it was just like he was so visibly surprised and so loud about it. And there was no subtlety.
It was
be like, what's that painting? Like it was literally almost those words of like, whoa, like the painting.
It's like the idea of the one instance I'm thinking of, and this is, I don't know how much of our listeners play video games, but there's an instance in the newest Spider-Man video game that came out, and there's a scene in it where Peter Parker is talking to Aunt May, and Aunt May works at this homeless shelter, and the people it's her birthday, and no, it's not her birthday. It's like a thanks for your service party kind of thing, the special surprise party for her. And these people, they tell Peter to distract her. And there's this it's nothing to do with like something behind and him trying to like, it's just him like trying to get her to not turn around and look at the people coming. And he's Aunt May is talking about like, oh, I wish you and Mary Jane would have worked out. Spoilers, Mary Jane and Peter aren't dating at the start of the game. I wish you would have worked out. You guys would have made beautiful babies. And Peter just screams, whoa! And it's like perfectly timed to make it seem like he's just like reacting to what she's saying, even though everyone's coming around the corner with the cake and everything.
That is exactly how this scene felt.
Exactly.
Where you're like, it's too coincidental the way he's reacting. But it's so funny.
Yeah, exactly. It was it was magical. Yeah. I do love those moments because they're just so ridiculous.
There was a lot of moments like that in this episode where you just kind of it half pulls you out, but it's so funny that I don't really care. Mm-hmm. That some of it writing wise is like a little dicey.
Yeah. Some
of the dialogue
was
so awful. I'm sorry to the writers, but some of the dialogue is just really awkward and doesn't feel real at all.
It's literally like my fourth note. Okay, here are
your notes.
My notes. I'll only read the 4 because the last one has something to do with
something you're gonna talk about later.
Yeah, something that'll come up later.
Okay.
My first note is Dean is still horny, and 7420 girl and friend. I made that a note as like, all right, here's the 2 of the girls that Dean is horny for in this episode. I was hoping there'd be more.
Yeah, there really wasn't. He was just like very interested in getting Sam.
Yes.
And Sarah together.
Still kind of weird.
Yeah.
Sam then becomes horny. And then Sarah, not good actor. So
I'm not sure if it was the writing or if it was her or if it was a combination, but it's very awkward. There are a couple scenes that work with her and Sam. Like the scene in the restaurant was not bad. There are a couple others, and the scene where they're talking outside of the library, where Sam's kind of telling her about Jess, and they're having a moment. She's telling him about her dead parent, and they have a moment, and that scene's not bad. But a lot of the other scenes with her are like really awkward. A lot of the scenes around her coming with them, and her reactions to finding out about the supernatural are very like, oh my gosh, supernatural is real.
Yeah, she
I'm gonna come along. Like, I liked the sentiment,
yes,
but it was awkwardly delivered, and the dialogue pieces itself, even I'm not sure how much better she could have done, because partly I think just the dialogue was really awkward.
I think they didn't handle that as well, because she just kind of like believed them.
Yeah,
like,
she didn't freak out. She freaked out for like 0.2 seconds.
Yeah, like,
and then they like cut and don't show her freaking out, and by the next time you see her, she's like on board.
See what the thing that with me, like, what I'm not drunk this time.
It's the bubbly.
It's the bubbly.
It's the bubbly.
It's got into my head. It went straight from my stomach to my head. What gets me is that she's so forward in that scene in the motel room, and was like, no, we're doing this. I'm with you. I'm doing this with you. Coming with you. That, why wasn't she like that at the end, being like, all right, I'm coming with you?
Yeah, she's weirdly, and she's also just like, she's like, I'm gonna come with you, and then she's like pretty useless once they are there. Like, I'm not saying she should have known more, but she like knows she knows enough. Like, when she goes with them, she knows enough, and she doesn't seem like, she seems like she's game for whatever's going to happen. And I don't think this is no shade on the character. I think this is actually just some like writing choices that doesn't feel like she has a natural progression from like, I know nothing about the supernatural, I'm just flirting with this cute guy, to like, oh my god, the supernatural is real, to like, oh, I'm going along, to like it just doesn't feel like it flows naturally. She's like a little inconsistent,
because like I could see it might drag it would probably drag the episode out a little too much if they had a conversation afterwards of her being like, I want to come with you, like, I want to do this with you, because like obviously she really liked Sam, so
though would that have made sense though for like her, she has like a career and a life, and yes, this is a guy she's known for like 2 days, and like, yes, there's a connection,
but it's TV. That happens in TV.
It does happen in TV. And maybe there's also a little bit, okay, so this is, you weren't on this episode, but there's a little bit of a mirror, and I had never noticed this before. There's a little bit of a mirror with this episode and Sam and Sarah to episode 13, Route 666, with Dean and Cassie. So in that episode, they go to a town where one of Dean's old flames, someone he dated years before, who calls them and is like, there's something supernatural here. And she didn't believe in the supernatural beforehand, but she sees weird things, calls them, and they have a few interactions where it's like they've got incredible chemistry. There's a very strong connection. And there's a sense of like, this could be a real relationship if I wasn't leaving, if my life wasn't on the road, if it's like the only thing that's like getting in between us being together is the circumstances. And I feel the same thing with Sarah, like even the goodbye they have, like where she says, maybe you'll call me, and he goes like, I will, and then they go back for a kiss, and the episode ends with them driving away. Like, that's almost shot for shot the same thing that happens in Route 666, where only in that scenario she, Dean is the one to kind of be like, maybe this doesn't have to be goodbye, and she's like, I know based on the circumstances, like, this is goodbye. And then they kiss, and then they drive away. So it's like very interesting seeing almost that mirror of like, they've both now been given people that could have been, and then they drive away. And spoiler alert,
if you haven't watched that episode, go watch it, because I probably won't.
It's actually a really good episode. It's a really good episode, mostly because I love, a huge crush on Cassie. Cassie's amazing. She's one of my favorite one-offs. But in the same way that like that episode handles Dean and Cassie, this episode handles Sam and Sarah very similarly, I think, in the ending, which is very interesting.
Sam not wanting to talk about his real feelings. That is a classic masculine trope, that men don't talk about feelings.
And it's not even just like, it's a trope in TV, but it's a trope in TV because it's a common like expectation in our society that like men don't talk about their feelings, especially I think, even like we are progressing as a society to be more
Oh, it's very, very different now.
It's very different now, but
so as a guy,
Mhm.
it's so different now, like
compared to your childhood or teen
compared
years.
to like specifically like teen years.
Yeah.
My parents were pretty good with that kind of stuff. Like I think that's why one of the reasons why I'm good with like, and just me being very forward with how I feel.
Yeah, you're honest and able to be open about that.
Yeah, but I think like I could see like I growing up, I was always honest with my emotions with a lot of people, with people I was closest to.
It's partly your personality and partly
yeah, but I think like
else.
a lot of it was like I had a lot of female friends
yes,
growing up, especially in high school, and
so context that allowed for that more and encouraged it.
Yeah, exactly. And I know a lot of my friends my guy friends in high school like didn't talk about emotions because like a lot of them who were like friends with a lot of other guy friends, like that's just not something they talked about.
No, and it's something that's like I think we actively like often discourage that in even young boys, like the amount of times that young boys are told, man up or don't cry or walk it off, like is proportionally a lot higher than what young girls are told, and it shows up in in your 20s when you don't know how to like speak about your real feelings.
Yeah, it's really funny. My dad was the one who was actually really like, like if I cried, he didn't tell me to stop crying. He was like, oh, like especially if he accidentally hurt me physically in like a wrestling match or something, he would chuckle and be laughing, but he'd be like comforting me. And, but my mom was the one
who was reinforcing those.
Those. I would come home with I remember in Saskatchewan where I grew up, or where I spent my childhood, at recess we would always we were in like the flattest part of Saskatchewan, and we had this man-made dirt mound for our sledding hill.
That is the most prairies thing I can think of.
It was all covered in grass at this point. Like it had been there for a long time, but we all forgot our sleds, and so we just used a massive thing of cardboard.
Oh yes, as all good Canadian children have done at some point in their lives.
But it had a lot of tape on the bottom, which didn't actually work as well as you think it would. And so I was in the front and I went face first and everyone ran over me. So I had a ridiculous bloody nose. I went home and my mom was
How old are you at this point?
Oh,
elementary school?
This was
middle school?
Probably grade 5 or grade 6.
Okay.
Yeah. And I got home and my mom worked from home at this point. And oh no, it must have been like grade 4. Yeah, grade 4, I think. Grade 4 or 5, because at this, my mom still would be working at home. And I come home and my mom's like starting to make lunch for us, because it was the recess before lunch. So we had a class in between, and then so I come home and like she doesn't like say anything. She's not like oh my gosh, like I've got blood all over my face. Granted, this is the second time this has happened. The first time being horrifically worse, which I could say in another podcast because it's a more intense story.
Right. So this is not the first time this has happened.
No, this is significant. Instead of my entire face being scraped off, it's just my nose.
Right.
And so she cleans me up. She gives me an early lunch, and then she's like, "All right, go back to school." Even though I have no clue if my nose is broken or anything, and it hurts like hell. Go back to school. The next recess happens again.
because you're a 9-year-old that's like, I'm not gonna miss out on sledding.
Exactly. So same thing happens. I come home, without even a beat, my mom's like, all right, go to the bathroom, clean it up, and go back to school. Suck it up. So if anything, that stereotype was brought on by mom. So thanks, Mom.
Well, it emphasizes the point that gender stereotypes can get reinforced by anyone.
Exactly. I never talked to guys about my feelings at all until probably until I moved to Victoria and started actually making legitimate guy friends. Mm-hmm. Like not just guys that I would hang out with, but like actual guy friends.
Yeah, where you could actually have vulnerable conversations.
Yeah, exactly. Like I never had, I think the only vulnerable conversation I had was with one of my closest friends who lived in the town an hour away from me. And so like him and I never like hung out that
Wasn't
often.
like your day-to-day friends.
Yeah, exactly. So like that's something that stereotype affected.
Yeah,
affected me. Because like a lot of like that was something that was hard because as you're growing up as like a 20-year-old guy, girls aren't necessarily always comfortable with you being with a guy being vulnerable with you when it's not,
because again we've reinforced this stereotype that like girls are allowed to be vulnerable and emotional and guys aren't.
And if a guy's being emotionally vulnerable with you, it means, you know, there's more than a friendship. We've
conditioned that, and elements like this show also are like conditioning that, because like all the times we've seen emotional vulnerability in this show so far have been primarily when there's been a girl that one of the boys is talking to. Even when sometimes the other one is there. So I'm thinking about in, I think, Dead in the Water. So episode 3, there is a scene, one of the very first episodes, and there's a scene where Dean is talking to a child who has lost a parent, and he's having a conversation about how he felt when he lost his mom with this child, to kind of like comfort this child and be like, I understand. And Sam is standing like right out just outside the shot. So Sam is hearing the conversation, and Sam has been badgering Dean to like they have not been able to have an emotional, like vulnerable conversation, the two of them. But with this like third party that's a child, Dean is able to be vulnerable. And then again, we see with Cassie, Dean is able to be vulnerable with her. We see with Sam and Sarah, like there's this context of like only with, you know, a girl, then, and it's in a romantic context, I'm able to be vulnerable. Because I think, yeah, like this show is conditioning that to be like the only element, only place where you're allowed to be vulnerable. And if you're vulnerable as a guy, that it must mean that there are like romantic feelings,
intentions,
or desires. And that's a really unfortunate, which I think even over the course of the show, as like society's developed and some things have changed, we're going to see more situations where they have female people in their lives or male people in their lives that they're able to be vulnerable with outside of romantic relationships. But it's going to take a while, and that sort of binary is still very much in play here.
Yeah, because that really affected my, even like making friends with girls in high school. For me, it still affected that, because in my mind it was like, oh, I'm being vulnerable with this girl, that means I have feelings for them, right?
But then if you have that with like, you have multiple, or you have connections with, you're able to have vulnerable moments with different people, you're like, oh no, do I like
all these people?
It becomes very hard to tell what your real feelings are, because you've been told that like this can only mean this. Emotional expression can only mean this.
To the viewer, I'm making emotional breakthroughs right now. This is legitimately legitimate emotional breakthroughs with Jacob and Abigail.
Yay, that's good. That's what this podcast is for. That's why we talk through themes, because it brings up interesting things.
This is something that like, I think that's why a lot of the times I have like really I get really confused about my feelings, because when I'm emotionally vulnerable with someone, it's like it triggers something in me to be like, you're emotionally vulnerable with this person because you have feelings for them, or you have feelings because you've been emotionally vulnerable with this person. It's like that's not the
only situation in which you can be emotionally vulnerable, and in fact it like probably shouldn't be. Like there should be opportunities for emotional vulnerability with all different kinds of relationships, as long as they're like, you know, mature, safe, like relationships that are able to be emotionally intelligent, like
exactly
that.
And so like this happened to me like throughout high school into my time in my 20s and stuff too. So I'm kind of just figuring this all out. I'm just figuring that all out now, so that's interesting.
And I found it interesting to connect it kind of back to the episode. The scene that I found.
Right, this is about a show.
Hey, this is about much more than a show. This is why we have these conversations.
I thought we just made fun of the show and that was it.
Yeah, no.
I didn't sign up I didn't sign up for counseling.
Well, okay.
That's a lie. I did, but not with you.
But no, that's good. That's good. Yeah, this is not a counseling session. Okay, but
wait, then why am I paying you $90 for these?
I don't know. You just handed money to me and you walked in the door today. I didn't ask questions. It's for the bubbly.
$90 for a bubbly. Jeez. John Bublé's getting his money's worth.
The scene.
Michael Bublé. I am so sorry.
Were you trying? Oh,
I
that's
said John
bad.
Bublé.
You said John Bublé, and I was like, that's very
Who's John
weird.
Bublé?
Who's John Bublé?
Michael Bublé's estranged twin.
It's off-brand Michael Bublé.
Michael Bublé.
John Bublé. He does bubbly water.
Wait, no. What music does John Bublé do? He does like really
His Halloween music.
He does Halloween music. He does different iterations of Monster Mash. and that's it.
And that's it. That's it.
The exact same voice.
The exact same voice.
Anyways.
The scene that I thought actually was really nice in terms of this was actually the scene with Sam and Sarah where they have I think 2 scenes where they talk about where they get a bit more vulnerable, and I appreciated that because it was a bit of a change from some of the like macho sort of presentation of the boys in this episode. It was a moment where they were both just, Sam and Sarah were both just kind of like humanly sharing their stories. And yes, there's this element of like romantic tension between them. But in that scene, it's not as much about that because they're, Sarah's sharing about how she lost her mom, and Sam's also sharing that he lost people and that it's hard for him to make these connections and be vulnerable. And I think that's one of my favorite scenes in this episode, because I think it is kind of breaking those gender stereotypes in some really nice ways.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, friends, we are going to move into our Going Meta segment. So first off, we have deaths. So meaningful deaths. How many deaths are there in this episode? Meaningful humans. 9.
The family. And I don't count the other ones that
the referenced ones.
The referenced ones. The
couple at the beginning scene,
and then the Evelyn.
Yes, 9. Okay. Next up is the Bechdel test.
Okay, so does it count if you're talking to a dead body?
No, because they have to talk to each other. They have to have a conversation. So no, this episode does not count.
I even checked. I even was like waiting for her to say something else other than her name, and she did. And then I was like, don't reference the boys. And she didn't. And I was like,
maybe it'll pass. No, it does not pass.
Damn it.
Really, the only significant female character with any sort of significant stuff in the episode is Sarah. Is there any?
Sarah and the girl, but the girl doesn't talk. She just
not Sarah and the girl. Yeah.
She screams and moves her head
and she's
around.
a spirit. It's not quite the same. It's not like a conversation. So. It's not really a conversation. If they had a conversation and it wasn't about to do that, I would give it a pass. But they don't have a conversation. No. She just they have an interaction.
Yeah.
Bechdel test is conversation, and it's the 2 girls at the beginning, but they're talking to Dean. So that's
no. They did talk to each other at the bar, but we didn't hear what they were saying.
Doesn't count.
No, they were nobodies.
Yeah.
So a solid no.
Solid
once again.
fail.
We are one for 4.
1 for 4 in the episodes you've been in. Yeah, well, I think we're only saying it maybe like 4 or 5 for.
Ouch.
19, maybe 5 or 6. Not very many.
Oof.
Very, very bad for female characters in this show.
All right.
Third is our lore check. So this episode doesn't really add a lot of lore. They
mentioned the Da Vinci Code.
That's pop culture. That. We're gonna get
lore.
to that.
Lore
is like show lore.
Sorry, I was thinking of pop culture stuff. I'm like, all right, what pop culture stuff has come up?
We'll come back to that. It doesn't really add a lot in terms of lore. We already knew that spirits can sometimes hang on to objects or things like that. So it being attached to the doll is not really that significant.
No.
And really, this is just a case of mistaken identity in terms of which spirit it is. But also, it's not really. And like the painting can move and change, which is interesting, but it's not really explained as lore, and it's not really.
I'd like to make a point of how impressive it was that Dean didn't wince or say anything about how bad that hair would smell to burn.
Yeah, I was actually
Like
surprised at that too.
Head of hair burning that would smell so bad.
I don't know if any of you have ever like singed your hair in any scenario. But it smells bad.
It doesn't smell great, bad. But imagine an entire head of hair just going up in flames.
And also old
yeah.
hair on an old doll that's also been sitting
preserved
for like
100 years,
150 years. It's probably gross. Yeah, I was expecting more of a wince from Dean.
Yeah,
he didn't really react the way we've seen him react other times to things that are gross. Dean usually has strong visual reactions to things that are gross, and he doesn't in this episode, and that's weird.
This is kind of a classic like horror movie.
It's like a salt and burn.
Classic like horror movie trope stuff.
Yeah, very classic.
Yeah.
You're down to the creepy doll and creepy girl.
Yeah, exactly.
Pop culture.
Yes. The Da Vinci Code was referenced.
And Dean says, I'm waiting for the movie. The movie came out about a month after this episode did.
Oh, really?
Or a month after this episode, like the timeline of this episode, like 2000, the early 2006. Yeah. So when Dean is saying I'm waiting for the movie, he's waiting for literally a movie that's coming out in a month.
Wow.
So maybe they went and saw the movie.
Maybe.
I don't know.
That movie was banned in our household because it was anti-Christian.
Yes, it was banned in my household too. High five for movies that were banned in your.
But then I watched it anyways, and it was like, why is this anti-Christian?
I never even saw it. I was never all that interested, honestly.
I mean, it is Tom Hanks though.
Yeah, I'm sure I wouldn't have disliked it.
It felt like a more adult version of National Treasure, but without the whimsical nature of Nicolas Cage.
Well, then it was really just like a worse
National Treasure.
A worse National Treasure,
which most movies are.
So next up is locations. This episode is again filmed Lower Mainland, Vancouver, a couple of bookstores. The graveyard where the crypt is in Fort Langley. And I know that because I recognize it very distinctly. I actually went Halloween one year, did a those like ghost tours.
Yeah, I did one a couple weeks ago in downtown. It was really fun.
Nice. Yeah, cool. I've done one in Fort Langley through that same graveyard that they're in this episode. It was pretty creepy. So like, nice. Props to them. It's a
graveyard would be a great place to do one.
Yeah, and it's in Fort Langley's this like small, really cute, like kind of old looking town with a lot of old like heritage buildings, and so there's a number of supernatural episodes that are filmed there to kind of give it that like autumn Halloweenish feel. But I think this might be the first time that they're in that location.
Okay.
And the episode itself takes place
upstate New York. I don't think they mentioned like a specific
town.
I'm
looking it up to see because I don't think they mentioned a specific town either.
Like there was no title card before saying where they were. All they said was upstate New York. So
let's see. What does the wiki say? I rely on these wikis a lot. Shout out to the supernatural wikis that make my life easier. Yeah.
Nothing.
I think upstate New York is our answer.
Cool.
In terms of international titles, this episode was called The Cursed Picture, The Haunted Painting, The Cursed Painting, The Portrait's Revenge in Hungarian, kind of all versions of that. Provenance, as Sam explains in this episode, is the papers that explain like where an item
comes from.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's a weird title that doesn't really.
Well, I think it's because it's like it's what Dean said. He said Providence, and then Sam was like Provenance.
Right. They have a whole conversation about it.
And so I think there's the whole like, I don't even know, what is the meaning? What is the
Provenance is the definition of provenance or providence?
Providence.
Providence is like the idea that almost destiny or like God's will or like God's favor, things like along that line. So kind of it's got spiritual, like pretty heavy spiritual overtones a lot of the time, at least in this kind of context.
Doesn't really have any meaning to this.
No, and Provenance is not that, because that was a miss here on Dean's part. So
yeah,
not a weird title choice, but okay.
It's kind of a weird episode in terms of the writing and everything.
Yeah.
So.
And last but not least, in our going meta segment, we have Gaydar.
Where does gayness come from, and how is it transmitted?
This episode, this episode's a whole lot of...
It's a lot of hetero love.
Hetero love.
And non-gays loving non-gays.
Well, or like... yeah.
That's what I got from it anyways.
That's fair. And you know, I want to read bisexual Dean onto every episode because I think it's there.
But there's
nothing in this episode specifically.
There's still...
It's a very...
Plus, from my point of view, I still don't see Sam as at least so far in this season.
That's fair.
There's nothing to point
no,
me
and
in
Sam.
that
Sam. There is some stuff with Dean.
Oh, Dean.
There isn't really some stuff with Sam.
Even
you
with,
haven't seen. You haven't
even
seen
with Dean. I haven't seen anything like that either.
We've seen it in a couple episodes that you haven't been on, and we've talked about. Okay. But again, it's very much like subtext and coding and things like that.
Right.
It's not explicitly out there. And
this was all non-gay Sam and non-gay Sarah.
Yeah, this is all like about the heterosexual romance of Sarah and Sam, and the tragic heterosexual romance of Sarah and Sam. Jacob is
fist bumping for heterosexual people. You don't have to keep that in.
But I appreciated it. It was funny to me. It was very visual to me.
Well, then you can keep it.
There we go. Yeah, that's about all we got for this. There's a lot of...
I'm not a that was very satirical what I did. I am not a
no, you're not.
I just want the people at home to know I support everyone's sexual preferences and gender identities 100%. This is just me supporting my own
okay.
and my own people.
So yeah, that's all we have to say on that. We're gonna move right along into I was gonna ask you to do predictions, but I don't think there's really
there's nothing like story wise that really happens that I have no. Yeah. I did make a prediction, but we talked about it right as the episode ended. I predicted that Sarah's never going to show up again.
Yeah, and spoiler alert. She does.
But that's all we're gonna say.
That's all we're gonna say.
But I was spoiled in terms of that. But I fully expected her to just never show up again.
And you know what? Honestly, the way she's written in this episode, I don't think. Well, they did not intend to bring her back.
No.
And the context in which they bring her back is not anytime soon, and it's not in the same capacity that she's in this episode.
All right.
That's all we'll say.
Cool.
If you know, you know.
All right.
That is all we have for you today, folks. So thank you for coming along for the ride. We wish you a peaceful road until we meet again. Next week, we will be discussing season 1, episode 20, Dead Man's Blood, through the theme of waste. Have a great week, everyone. A note to our listeners. This episode was recorded prior to our season 3 name change, where we went from Driver Picks the Podcast to Saving People, Queering Things. For all of our new social media platforms, visit queeringthingspodcast.com.